Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Chag Sameach and happy Passover to all the listeners of Bad Jew. This is Judaism's most iconic holiday. Rugrats did an episode on it. With us today to explain how exactly to lead a dinner for this iconic holiday is Larry Cohen. Larry Cohen's a wonderful philanthropist. Larry, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. How you doing?
Good. It's really a blessing to have you here on the show. Something that has needed to happen for some time. You're a family friend, and you're also a mentor and a leader that I've looked up to for some time. You also lead amazing Shabbat dinners, and I can only imagine that your Passover Seder is going to be epic. So I'm really excited for you guys. And Chag Sameach.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that.
Of course. So, Larry, you've also been a fan of my show, which is honestly incredibly touching. And as you know, there is a right of entry under the podcast, which is the 4-minute Bad Jew challenge, where we're going to time you for 4 minutes telling your life story. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Whatever you need.
Excellent. Echad, shtayim, shalom.
All right. I'll try to do it actually in under 4. So I mean, in terms of life story, for me, it really comes down to a continual search for stability and meaning. I visualize a 3-legged stool because that's the most stable thing you can sit on. And that's how I sort of think about my life. And I break things down into those 3 legs. The first leg is really family and friends. I invest my time in growing and nurturing those very important relationships, creating memorable experiences, and working to build a supportive community around me. And I rely on those folks, and I try to be there for them. And so for me, family and friends are very important, and it takes an investment to maintain those relationships. The second leg is work. I started a company 30 years ago called Glyphics Advertising, and we're an advertising agency. We build brands. We create the tools to help clients grow. So we're able to have an impact on those companies. And in fact, just today, we launched a brand new food product. Oddly enough, we literally launched a Haroset product today for Passover, which is going to be hopefully in stores soon. And we're working with BBS and some other organizations to launch this new Haroset product. It's fascinating. And so that kind of work is very rewarding. It's very creative. And it gives me a great deal of satisfaction working with clients. Then the third is philanthropy. That's the third leg. And that's all about giving back to the community. You know, the whole Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place, philosophy. I just finished up my term as president of the Shalom Institute. I'm now the campaign chair. So I'm working with them to raise a great deal of money, about $80 million to rebuild the Institute, which was burnt down in the Woolsey fire back in 2018. And so I spent a lot of time working with the Shalom Institute to rebuild the camp. I think Jewish camp is super important. And I work with the Jewish Federation, and I sit on school boards and temple boards and JCC boards, because I think it's all about really being engaged and really being hands-on. I've actually been very blessed to have a family foundation that our family started a few years ago that allows us to support a number of different organizations, nonprofits, both here and in Israel. And so, I combine these 3 legs together, and for me, it creates balance. All right. They each feel an important purpose, and they provide me with meaning and goals, and they support each other. So what I do in philanthropy, I meet great people. Those people maybe will become friends or clients. Those clients then will help me in supporting causes that are important to me. So once you get it going, you sort of create this positive loop that feeds on itself. And so I find that for me, really creating that kind of environment helps me be the best I can be. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, great use of the 4-minute Bad Jew challenge. Also, I mean, what an awesome piece of tikkun that you do. I've seen your family, the Cohen family, continuously give and, go out of their way with your foundation to support these amazing causes. What you're doing for JCA Shalom is amazing, and it touches my heart because I'm a product of Jewish summer camp. I went to Camp Balanim growing up, and there were fires as I was growing up that threatened the camp's existence. And I'm just grateful that it never did have to undergo that kind of destruction. Now we're talking about the Shalom Institute here, and you've made incredible strides, and there's still more work to be done. And I just want to commend you for the amazing work that you've done, and I know that it's going to be a legacy that your family holds with pride. So kol hakavod to you and your tikkun olam that you've given to this world. It's really amazing.
Thanks. I
Um,
appreciate it. I think Jewish summer camp is just one of the most, that's one of our silver bullets. If Jewish continuity is important to you, sending generations to Jewish summer camp is just a great way to get Judaism in their hearts and celebrate it and find the joy in it. So it's something we're really passionate about.
I definitely plan when I have children to take my children to do a summer camp, and I couldn't be more excited.
Uh,
But Larry, I'm going to call you an unofficial rabbi. You again lead these incredible meals, incredible Shabbat dinners. I've never experienced the Seder of yours. Everyone's Haggadah, which is the Passover story, is read a little bit differently. But how do you lead a Passover Seder?
Well, I mean, there's a number of things that we do. I think that come together. The one mitzvah for Passover is really telling the story. That's your job, is to tell the story. So I think whatever you can do to enhance that experience for the people around your table, you do it. So I'm not real big on rules. So for me, it really starts with the guest list. We really try to bring folks around the table who have a point of view and who are different. So Reform, conservative, Sephardic, Ashkenazi, LGBTQ, Jews of color, non-Jews. I want them all around the table. The messaging of Passover is so universal. I think it just makes it such a wonderful discussion and such a wonderful evening. You have people with different backgrounds and who come to the table with a different point of view. So I would say I start with the guest list, make it interesting. The more the merrier. So that would probably be where I start.
I think that's a
Um,
great place. I think that's a great place. So focusing on diversity, why in Passover does it warrant such diversity though?
Because the message of Passover, it's such a universal message of freedom. You're talking about, removing the shackles of bondage, whether those shackles are emotional shackles, alcohol, drugs, bad relationships, crazy parents, insecurity. Are you a slave to technology? Are you a slave to social media? All of us can relate to those things, no matter what your background is or what your current situation is. And so I think Passover is such a celebration of hope and optimism that it speaks to everybody. And I think people can really relate to it. And so in that sense, I think again, it has that universal message that speaks to everybody.
I think you're tying into something here, which is a really interesting theme. The idea that we all have certain restrictions, certain restraints that hold us down, that bog us down. And that challenges the attendees of the Passover Seder to be a little bit vulnerable, even if they're not directly sharing what is holding them down in life to do that. Is there anything that people can add to their Seders that make it a safe space that allow for that kind of vulnerability to be shared in a room like that?
Well, I think again, just the openness and the invitation, and to say to people, look, this is not a right or wrong. There's no right or wrong answers here. This is really about sharing experiences and contributing to the greater conversation. So I think, unlike maybe I think one of the reasons Passover is very popular is because you get to do it at home. I think creating a comfortable environment in your home is one of the things that opens the door and it makes people more comfortable. Um, One of the things that we do at our Seder is, some Seder, I grew up in a very traditional Seder that ran very long, like 3 or 4 hours, right? You sit there as a kid dying to eat. We have snacks. The minute you sit down, I've got a table full of snacks. We have nuts and fruits and all kinds of things that people can kind of nosh on. You create an environment. It's almost like a dinner party in a sense that, at least for us, we want to make it very comfortable. We don't want anybody, just looking at that page 39 where, dinner is served. I want them to enjoy it. So I think creating again that atmosphere where people are comfortable and people may be shy at first. They may not, be willing to speak up, but that's okay. You invite them the next year and they realize kind of what the goal is. But I find most people, given the opportunity, do open up and love to share. And even if they're just sitting there quietly, I think they're taking something in.
I think that's really special. I think what Passover Seder I think one thing that really marks the Passover Seder is that before the meal actually began, there's a lot of rituals and there's a lot of reading a story. And for some people who are just disengaged, it's just a lot of sitting and waiting, right? So you have this period of time when you might be bored, twiddling your thumbs. But I think there's also an opportunity there, almost like the Jewish meditation known as Hippolyte, right? Hippolyte is the ritual of going into nature. Rabbi Nachman taught it in Breslov in the 1800s. really cool concept of just like immersing yourself in nature and letting nature become your shul. It's a really cool idea, right? So in some way, there might be room to allow a certain kind of stillness in the mind during the Passover Seder for you to just take in the story and also be in your own thoughts and take that time to reflect. I think that's a really interesting idea for sure.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, I also think it's the job of the leader. Again, when I lead a seder, I look at it as a full contact sport. So I don't let people, and this sounds terrible. I don't let people just sit there quietly. If they want to, they can, but I really work hard to engage them. For example, we all do the plagues, right? Get through the 10 plagues. I asked the group, if you were coming down with plagues today, what would those plagues be? Maybe it's your cell phone doesn't work. That's a plague. I mean, what would make you crazy today? So, I like to ask the group questions and get their input. So, for example, we see the items on the Seder plate, right? We all know we're familiar with the items on the Seder plate. If you were starting the Passover holiday today, what would be on your Seder plate? What different items would be on your Seder plate? And it's remarkable how different people have completely different points of view and what they would put on there, and that opens up a world of discussion. So simply by asking questions like that, what would you change on the Seder plate? What would you add to the Seder plate? Again, what plagues, would you bring down if you were God to, in the modern era? Those are, again, no right or wrong. They're just fascinating questions that maybe people hadn't thought of. I think it's about engagement. So you're telling the story, but you're helping people engage with you and to sort of consider their own backgrounds and how they would tell their own story.
Amazing. Amazing. Could I ask you a potentially sensitive question?
Go for it. You know me, I'm open book.
So what are the things that are making you feel restrained these days? And what will make this Passover significant enough for you to break out of the shackles of those restrictions?
Great question. I would say, the shackles for me are, I think, limitations of time. There's a lot I want to do. It's like I gotta be, better at, managing time and things like that. Um, but I'm not sure that's answers your question exactly. But what I want to bring to the table this year is really obviously October 7th. A huge issue. We're going to set a place for the hostages. I think, as a community, the rude awakening we had towards anti-Semitism in our own backyard is I guess for me a shackle. How do I deal with that? How do I deal with my community? How do I continue to respect people's opinions when they are, in a sense, chanting for the death of our people? My wife Laura and I do a lot of work on college campuses, UCLA, USC, 818, and to hear what these kids have to say, the ignorance is staggering. And so it's very disappointing. And I think that's something that we really have to reckon with. And I'm sure that's something that we'll be talking about at our Seder this year.
I totally get that, and that resonates with me as someone who went to San Francisco State and before Bad Jew even happened, experienced anti-Semitism and,
Yeah.
went to partake in a lawsuit later on known as Volk for CSU Board of Trustees,
Mhm.
It's something that definitely resonates with me, and I think that while I leave that story with a lot of pride, I also know that it was a mere dent in a huge, huge machine that
Mhm.
is operating across these college campuses. It definitely is a plague that we, the Jewish people, are endure currently in the United States and also around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me, just to be fair, what bogs me down, my restrictions that I really want to work on for this Passover to break out of the shackles of probably the amount of screen time I get personally. I'm constantly managing media and managing social media,
Mhm.
producing podcast content, not just for Bad Jew, but for my clients. You
Mm.
know, Larry and I work in very similar industries in marketing and advertising and media content creation. And I'm sure, Larry, you can relate, especially as you've seen a shift into the digital age where marketing is both traditional and non traditional nowadays. My eyes are glued to the screen. I now wear blue light glasses. I'm not wearing blue light glasses now because I'm on
Right.
the air, but normally, like, here's my glasses case there.
Right.
It totally bogs me down. So I think that taking the time to really, again, go out and reflect and to be in my own space and let time stay still for a little bit just sounds so freeing and liberating. I think maybe that's the theme is anything we can do to liberate ourselves is the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I've got friends who run tech companies who won't let their kids on social media because they know how bad and addictive it is. I think it's really, I mean, there's obviously a time and a place, but I think for a lot of people, it kills time, it kills ambition, it allows you to sit around and be lazy. For a lot of people, it becomes an addiction and they just can't get away from it. There's a big, beautiful world out there that people need to be exploring. And I think, unfortunately, we're so glued to our screens. And we read an article recently about traffic accidents. More people are being killed now walking down the street, looking at their cell phone. I think a gentleman was just recently killed over on San Vicente, literally who walked into traffic, killed, got killed. We're glued to these screens, and there's got to be the happy balance there. You got to find the right, the right time and place for everything.
Life's too short to be glued to a phone. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So, Larry, you did bring up something that I was planning on bringing on, which is the elephant in the room, which is that, we're still in the middle of a war. It is currently April 17th. By the time people are listening to this episode, it's April 17th and post that. We just survived Iran's attack and we don't know how Israel is going to retaliate. And we're
Neither do I.
constantly under that anticipation of what's going to happen
Yep.
next.
Yep.
Jewish people are on edge internationally, feeling like we have to be on the defensive on a regular basis
Hmm.
while just surviving every day and somehow trying to act normal and trying to live our everyday lives.
Hmm.
What I guess what how can you bring intention to the Seder table this Passover with all this happening in mind?
Well, I mean, I think it's again, first of all, it's about acknowledging it and then discussing it. I think once people start discussing things, that gives you the ability to sort of deal with it and to reckon with it, and to see how other people are dealing with it as well. And you realize that you're surrounded by friends and people who have hopefully a similar point of view and are able to support you. I think again, it's a lot of it's about building community, and I think this is a rude awakening for many of us in terms of what's going on. But again, I oftentimes will think about stories during the Holocaust where they were inexplicably managed to celebrate Passover in a concentration camp. I think about how incredible is that to be in that situation and to still have the faith and the hope and want to somehow smuggle in matzah or to say the prayers or to do anything even remotely like a seder. I mean that's what sustains Jewish life: eternal optimism, incredible stamina and determination. As bad as things are right now, we've had it so much worse over the last 2,000 years, and it will make it through this like everything else. And, I think hopefully as long as we stay on the right side of the truth and remain true to our beliefs, our core beliefs, our standards, I think we will survive. And again, I think it comes down to just, being true to who we are.
Amen. I couldn't agree more. I think the Passover story in many ways is very indicative of where we are as a people right now, especially when you think of the Jews that escaped Egypt. One thing that really resonates with me, I think is so relevant to today, is that not all of them made it out. Not all the Jews made it out. And the Jews that stayed were slaughtered. It was
Mhm,
like what, 20% of the Jews that existed in total stayed
mhm.
in Egypt? Is that correct?
Some chose not to leave. They were afraid. When you come from a place of fear, that limits your opportunities.
So ultimately, for the Jewish people, in order to be free this Passover, we have to veer away from fear. We have to do whatever we can to embrace the opposite of fear. That's
Mhm.
what it sounds like. That's how to make a meaningful Passover Seder this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, I think, like most things in life, like I go back to my three-legged stool, it's about balance. Yes, we are living through some very tragic times. But Laura and I talk about the hostages a lot, and we think about every night before we go to sleep, we think about, we say a prayer for these hostages. What an unbelievably horrific situation they're in. At the same time, you have to live life, and I think at the same time you have to celebrate. And so again, it's about that balance. I think this Passover, we're going to try to do both. We need to celebrate and retell that story of leaving, leaving Egypt, leaving bondage, always, working towards that sort of that promised land or that promised state of being where we're free from these things that limit us and are able to celebrate life and enjoy it.
I couldn't agree more. Now, Larry, take a step back now from that topic. I would like to focus a little bit more on the personal for a second. Of course, this episode has warranted for some personal stories, but I'd actually love to know from your memory, what was the most meaningful Passover Seder to you?
Well, for us, it's really, you know my kids, Rachel and Adam, they are amazing. They're very creative. And so
Cool.
every year we try to mix it up, you know. So, we always do an interview with Moses and Zipporah. Rachel dresses up as Moses. Adam is hysterical because he wants to be in Monty Python. So he dresses up as Zipporah. He totally gets in the character. And I interview them. And I ask them, so Moses, what was it like being in the desert? Can you tell us the story of the burning bush? And she says, well, it wasn't a burning bush. Actually, it was a burning tush. One of my sheep had a rash. And so we just have a good time with it. And so, my memories are just really of the kids having a great time. My brother David is a musician. They always do a Broadway musical Seder, right? Which is very, very non-traditional. And people would say, oh, that's ridiculous. But for them, it's perfect. They've got a lot of Broadway musical friends. Their friends come over, they sing. My brother David scored the whole thing. It's got a musical score. It's a wonderful Seder. It's completely non-traditional. And my grandfather would not even go. My father even struggled with it at times. But for them, it's a perfect Seder. They've got 25 people around the table. They're singing and they really enjoy it and they embrace it. And so I think, for us, it's about, really making it personal. Real quick, you asked that a personal memory. My parents went to visit refuseniks in Russia back in the late 70s during Passover, and they got there and they were strip searched and they were harassed by the SS and everybody, and they eventually made it to a Passover Seder. Little town, right, in a little tiny apartment. There were a bunch of people. They were literally followed to this Passover Seder, so they were scrutinized. But they got there and they joined a Russian family Seder, didn't speak a word of Russian. This family didn't speak a word of English, and yet my parents were able to follow the entire Seder. That to me was remarkable. Here they are in Russia, and yet they were able to follow Passover Seder because of the traditions and things we do, and just the camaraderie, that they were able to find at that table. And to me, that's a powerful memory that shows you no matter where you are, Jews are connected in very meaningful ways, whether you speak the language or not. So.
I think that's so true. I think that, especially right now, the Jews are more united than ever before. Take a step back though to that whole entire family memory with you and Rachel and Adam. First of all, love Rachel and Adam. They're sweet people, full of chesed. You raised them well, but also something that has become apparent from the stories that you told is that you focus make these holidays memorable and cherished and childhood memories that last a lifetime that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And now I look at them, by the way. Rachel is one of the top dogs at USC Hillel. And Adam is now in a Shabbat home and is very involved with Shlit.
Mhm.
So, in other words, these memories have led them to embracing their identity so much that they've become Jewish leaders in their own right, young Jewish leaders in their own right. I think that's amazing. So, that means that there's an equation, good childhood memories and focusing on those and fostering those meaningful moments will always lead to an amazing future as a Jewish leader.
Well, you hope so. And again, that's why I'm very big on Jewish camps. I think if you give kids these wonderful experiences that they enjoy and they remember fondly, then they'll try to recreate those as they get older and for their families as well. My greatest dream is for my kids to have their own families and for me to be able to show up at their Passover Seder and, critique them from the other end of the table like they've been doing to me for the last 30 years. So you want to pass it on. I mean, these are things that we value, that we find are important, and that I think, are worth passing on to the next generation. I think, again, you want to make it fun and enjoyable. Again, it's no different than, a dad who takes his kid out fishing and they have great experiences. And then you hope the kid grows up and wants to fish with their kids and bring grandpa along and stuff. So I think you're right. It's about living it, walking the walk. You can't tell kids anything because they won't listen to you, which is fine. We did the same thing. We ignored our parents. But again, if you can sort of walk the walk and set a good example, again, your dad's the exact same way. Joel's an amazing leader in the community. And I think that's why you're such a great kid. I'm not sure you listened to what they said, but you sure watched them closely. That's what kids do. Yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think again, that's how you set the example for your kids. Walk the walk. And again, they'll figure it out. They're smart.
I feel blessed every single day that my parents raised me to be the person that I am. I will say that being an only child, I definitely have added an extra pressure to it because I feel like if I'm the only child and I'm the only legacy, then I really have to make it a point to do right by this world.
There you go.
I have there's only me. It all really bottlenecks on me. But I will also say that I did have great parents. My mom's very involved in Hadassah, and my dad works very closely with you and Jewish business leaders.
Right.
And, my dad also did stuff with his temple growing up, Temple of Chaim. And, I'm really grateful that my parents have just been really amazing Jewish leaders in this time in their own right and their own communities. And it's really been inspirational.
Well, again,
So
it goes back to the old Harry Chapin "Cats in the Cradle" song. The kids watch their parents and they emulate their parents. I mean, how many friends do you have? You look at the parents, you kind of go, "Oh, I see why they're like this, or I see why they're like that." And the apple doesn't fall too far some of the time. And I think if you're lucky
right.
enough to be blessed with parents like you have, and you see how happy they are and how they're respecting the community and how they build great community around them, it rubs off. I think it's something that you then want to sort of emulate.
Chip off the old block. So Larry, what's then the most practical way for someone to start a Passover Seder if it's their first time?
There are so many resources online. You go online, type in how to run a Passover Seder. There's everything from Dr. Seuss, the Haggadahs. Jubilong has an amazing Haggadah. Stand With Us has a Haggadah. There's so many different ways to do it. I think the trick is there's no pressure. There's no right. There's no wrong. Get a bunch of friends. The menu. It's really not that complicated. You know what I mean? If you can buy that in the store, you buy some horseradish, you can filter fish if you want. Rachel does a vegan Seder. Make it your own, customize it, invite your friends around the table and tell them, look, I've never done this before. This is my first time out. I'm looking to all of you to help me make this happen. It's really not that hard. Don't feel like you have to hit a certain mark or a certain standard. Just do it. That's all it takes. If you have to stumble through it, that's fine too. And you'll get to the end and you'll sing Haggadah and next year in Jerusalem and it'll be great. And you'll get some feedback from your friends and maybe you'll do it, again next year. I think the fact that there's two Seders is nice. You get to go to one and then maybe have your own. So you get to borrow from everybody, but again, don't feel there's any pressure that you have to do it right. Just do it. And again, I think it'll naturally, depending on who's around the table, be a really wonderful experience.
I think that's beautifully said, Larry. You just gotta you just gotta try it. You just gotta do it. And I forgot which Stoic leader said it. I think it might have been Seneca. So forgive me if I'm wrong, but he said, if you're gonna learn something, you have to be willing to look stupid. That's what he
Mhm.
said.
Look,
And
I mean, you don't learn anything from getting it right. You only learn from getting it wrong. So, every time you fail, you learn something. It means you're trying hard. My dad was fond of saying, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So failing's a wonderful thing. That's where you learn.
agreed. Agreed. Larry, I think that's a great final step, thought to leave with people. And so I want to thank you for being on Bad Jew to talk about how to set a Seder, how to do a Seder, how to lead your own. Really incredible. I think there's just a lot of great practical places to even start for people and a lot of great mindsets and intentions that people can apply here. For those who are listening, what is the best way that they could support you in your efforts, Larry?
Oh, well, for me, get out there and do it is the best way you can help me spread the word. It personally, JCA Shalom, the Shalom Institute is we're raising money, to rebuild the camp. We have a lot more to go, and we've raised a lot so far. But if people are interested in supporting that, I'd be more than happy to talk to people also one-on-one about, if they want to make a meaningful gift to sponsor some of the rebuild, naming opportunities. We have all kinds of things like that. So it's a great organization to get involved with. I'm happy to chat with anybody about it. And if they want more information, they can reach out to me or they can go to the Shalom Institute website, shalominstitute.com, and they can learn more about what's going on up there.
Brilliant. Larry Cohen, thank you for being on Bad Jew. And to the listeners, be sure to go onto badjew.co to support this podcast. We have a lot of awesome merch. For those who follow my socials, you see my Mazel Tov outfits. Adam actually just bought a Mazel Tov outfit. We also have a lot of great ways to get involved in our community. We have the Bad Jew WhatsApp community. All you got to do is email badjewpod@gmail.com to be a part of our safe space where you can raise any question you have about being Jewish and talk with other fans about the Jewish experience. To the listeners, please subscribe, leave a review, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Hug Sameach.
Yeah.
Shalom.